day. My name is Hlengi Wedube. I am with the Center for Human Rights of the University of Pretoria as the Expression, Information and Digital Rights Manager. And today I am here to have a conversation around women's rights in the digital age. We are seeing the African continent embracing digital technologies, and women are also online. They're also using these technologies. And today we want to have that conversation on women's rights. How are women faring in the digital age? And my guest today is Ms. Khadija El Usman. Ms. Khadija is with Paradigm Initiative. She is a legal practitioner. She has experience in legal practice. She has worked in the government department. She has also worked in the civil society. She has interest in social justice issues, but specifically she has interest in children's rights and also in women's rights. And today, Khadija, we have you to talk to us about women's rights in the digital age. Welcome to this session.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. We are going to benefit richly from your expertise on women's rights today. And let's start off with a positive note. Looking at the digital age, how do you think it enhances women's rights?
So the digital age has definitely enhanced women's rights, first off by just visibility. Women are more open, they are more vocal about their rights, and this has led to more awareness and eventually action. You know, say on social media, for example, women can share their struggles, what exactly is going on, and people who did not see that before can now see it, and more people are plunged into action. We also have the fact that the digital age has brought more women to access information. This has led to more female participation in labor markets, financial markets, entrepreneurship, digital literacy all around. And it has changed our idea of work. It no longer has to be, you know, the physical manual labor where men were expected to do it all. So the access to information has given, access to opportunities has now allowed women to earn more money and have a better standing in society. So positives.
So indeed, there are some positives there. I like the fact that you are mentioning movement building. Yes, women are building movements online and also being connected and also, you know, being on social media, accessing information and also access to digital economies. And this is being made possible, enhancing women's lives. But in all this, Khadija, we are seeing that Africa still suffers, you know, when it comes to the digital divide. I want you to speak now on the gender digital divide. What do you have to say about the gender digital divide in Africa?
Okay, so I suppose just a brief explanation of what it is for anyone who's watching who doesn't know. It's the difference between groups and their access to technology and the internet and those without said access. Women and girls have suffered less access to technology compared to boys, particularly in more developing countries like some of Africa's countries. Women struggle to afford technology, to afford internet access. And like I mentioned before, some of the stereotypes that come with work, some of this has gone into accessing digital tools and careers that relate more in STEM. People and cultures believe that this should be left to men, and it has left women in such cases disadvantaged. So you find that about 90% of the jobs today have some sort of digital component. And if women do not have the required digital skills. They do not have access to this technology. They are prejudiced as to going into these career paths. Then you can already see that women cannot or do not have as much access as they possibly could have, and they do not gain as much from technology as they possibly could. So that's the digital divide.
So in speaking about this digital divide, what are the specific barriers really that hinder women from meaningful access or meaningful connectivity? What are those specific barriers?
Okay, I think I mentioned affordability before.
Okay.
Women are, they earn less, as such they can afford less, so there's the issue of affordability. There's also the issue of digital skills, because a lot of women are less educated compared to their male counterparts. They do not have the required digital skills. We also have the issue of low literacy. Goes back to digital skills. There is a lot of, there could be more policy in this in this regard to assist women to have better access. Sometimes you'd find that devices are a bit too complex for them to use. And then there's also the issue of privacy and data protection. You'd find that less women trust going online, again, against their male counterparts, because a lot of things, especially culturally, can be used against women more than men. So they're more skeptical to put their information out there, to use some of these technologies, and it hinders their connectivity and access.
Thank you, Khadija, for taking us through this. And I think also it's important to also mention that we are also fighting against patriarchy, that system, and it also contributes again to issues around meaningful connectivity. And we have seen what happens sometimes when you mention issues around privacy. Some of the private images or private information of women that spills into the online platforms, and that has negative repercussions. And I believe that also is one of the issues that are really something that we can mention on issues of meaningful access. And but if you're looking at the ideal, what we are striving for, what will be meaningful access to you? What will be that which you will define as, this is the meaningful access that we want women in Africa to experience? Can you describe that for us, at least to give us some kind of guidance on what we can expect with saying this is meaningful connectivity or meaningful access?
Okay, so we're talking affordable internet, a fraction of your earning, not that you have to plan half of your salary or whatever just to get access to the internet. Then quality of access is also so important. We're taking into account the speed of the access, the allowance, the device type, and how often you're able to have this access. This would be meaningful connectivity for me, and I'm very sure a lot of women around me.
Okay, allow me to just make reference to the African Commission's revised Declaration of Principles on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information in Africa. It actually mentions issues on access, and under Principle 37 on access to internet, it says that states shall recognize that universal, equitable, affordable, and meaningful access to internet is necessary for the realization of freedom of expression, and also for the exercise of access to information rights and other rights in general. So when you're talking about meaningful access, I like that you are making a reference to this point here in other ways, which is raised in the Declaration of Principles on Freedom of Expression. And also the declaration is very clear about non-discrimination. It's very clear about everyone, regardless of their status, regardless of their gender, regardless of whatever other status. So that will be meaningful access, issues around equitable, universal, affordable, and meaningful access. So thank you for that. I think we now have an idea. I think also meaningful will be a situation where women do not just have access, but they know how to meaningfully
Use it.
use the access to technologies or the access to internet. And from there, Khadija, what I want to us to talk about right now in this conversation is the issue of violence.
Mm,
As you notice that, we are still dealing with gender-based violence
yes.
against women offline. It's been a conversation that is ongoing. Strategies are being proposed and implemented. But as women embrace these digital technologies and using the cyberspace, the violence that we see offline is also manifesting online. And I want you to address us on the issue of the different forms of violence that women face online.
Okay, so I'm glad that you mentioned that it's it's a direct reflection of our society's violence offline. So obviously, as people continue to move online, everything that you see offline moves on there as well. So you can find stalking, harassment, identity theft, threats of physical violence that could often be realized in person, body shaming, self-censorship, or well, censorship, people attempting to silence women on any issue that they wish to speak on. There is isolation, exposing of private information, and just private photos and things like that. All sorts of, I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. Everything that you can imagine can happen offline, can happen online as well. And it's even more important because people seem to not take it as seriously. They spew all sorts of words at women, and they come back at it and saying it's a joke. Women can't take a joke. We don't really mean it. Loosen up and stuff like that. But it is just as serious and has just as much impact on women uh, uh, offline as it does online, because we find that less women are feeling the need to be online. You find that on social media, especially, more women are closing down their accounts, isolating themselves in a way that denies them access to information, access to opportunities, and takes away their freedom of expression. So it's such an important topic to talk about.
Just to build on what we have just said, are there any specific groups of women that experience this kind of violence more than others? Are there any groups that we can actually single out as more vulnerable to these kinds of violence?
So you see, I think a lot of the time this is unique to particular regions or places, but then we can always say that people who live with disability are more disadvantaged than most. Um, Sexual minorities are also more disadvantaged than most. So these groups of women already fall under the disadvantaged groups when it comes to being women. Then they go further to be part of another set of disadvantaged groups that find them being in the position where they're positioned towards the violence of people, unfortunately.
Okay. Yes, I think yes, sexual minorities. We see that when women who belong to the sexual minorities groups come out openly on online platforms, and their sexuality is made public. Sometimes they face those repercussions, such that the online space becomes not safe for them. And when
Mm,
they come from repressive environments, that kind of negative attitude online can actually be taken off. It can have serious consequences offline as well. So you can actually see that something that can start online can have an impact offline. And there is also, I guess there is also, we can also mention the experiences of female politicians. the female
Mm.
politicians online, in as much as the internet space or the online space is helping women to build movements and also to launch their political careers and participate in the public life. The participation of women online that are in public office, especially politicians, they are also called all sorts of names, the cyber
Yes.
bullying, and also the sharing, non-consensual sharing of intimate images as well.
Mm.
Sometimes when people want to silence a certain public figure, they can actually use such kind of tactics and expose some of these online. That can actually, if it happens, that can actually silence an individual from their political life or from the online space, and then this has an impact on their rights. This is freedom of expression. This is their right to association or their right to participation. Will also be affected. I think we also need to mention just young girls in general. And now
Yes.
these children are going online, they are learning online. There is more access to technology for children than before, and that comes with a lot of challenges. Child protection online is a serious
Mm.
issue, and issues around child grooming. Those are issues that are being experienced, and this is also coming to Africa now. It's something that we used to read about in the Western countries or in Europe. Now
Mm.
it's coming to Africa. Issues of child grooming and children being
Yes,
lured
just
online. Yeah.
predators.
Yes, the online predators. This is happening on the continent. All right. So and all this predicament of this violence against women online, which is manifesting in its different forms that we have just spoken about, and how it affects certain group of women probably more than others. But we need to also begin to talk about the solutions. How can we approach this? What should be done? What would you propose as solutions to address this technology enabled, as we can say, technology enabled violence against women? What are those things that you think you can propose and say, probably if we take these initiatives, this could contribute to tackling this violence against women online?
I think definitely one of the first ways to go is creating more awareness around it, just
Mhm.
for people to know how serious it is, that it has uh, physical repercussions, mental repercussions, economic repercussions, and because of its serious effects, we need to take it seriously. More people need to be aware. More policies around it then need to be created in workplaces. There aren't enough, like in Nigeria, where I am, there is no law that addresses digital or technology enhanced violence. That's a mouthful, but you get what I'm saying. All the laws that address violence are towards physical violence. So that leaves women at a loss as to where to go on to find some sort of to find justice. So you go to police stations, they don't take it as seriously. So there needs to be more policy, there needs to be more legislation once there is awareness in this regard. Then we need to invest in digital safety. There needs to be more investment in digital safety, especially for women and children. All the which comes, it goes back to uh, digital literacy and increasing digital skills of this group of people so that things such as, say, two-factor authentication does not sound so complex. That way you can protect yourself from the catfishes and those who try to, steal your identity and such in a way that affects your life. So a lot of the solutions are also not too far-fetched from handling physical violence. We're talking about listening to survivors, standing against rape culture, funding women's organizations. So we shouldn't take online violence too far away from offline violence because they're both birds of the same feather.
I just want to ask you, Khadija, maybe let's just focus on this kind of solutions. If
Mm.
if I go to a police station right now in Abuja and report that someone has shared my private images without my consent, what will be the likely reaction of the law enforcement officers there?
Unfortunately, one of the first things you would hear was, why did you have that in the first place? So it would go towards victim blaming. So that's where things like awareness need to come in. It's not just for the random people on the street, but we're talking awareness for law enforcement, awareness for the judiciary, because a lot of their personal biases come into play when it comes to handling these situations. So a lot of the time, the victim will be blamed, and that's why there is a lot of shame when it comes to reporting these situations, even where the victim played absolutely no role in the violence that came back towards them. So it's usually a bit difficult to have these things handled by police. You'd find that a lot of women find more justice reporting to the platform that was given to the person in the first place. So say reporting on Twitter, for instance, that your privacy has been violated, this picture was taken without your consent, they can take it off. Unfortunately, there's more justice in that sphere than in real life.
Would you then propose, Khadija, would you propose that in the curriculum of the law enforcement training, to when I'm sure they address issues around gender-based violence, probably have a digital angle to it so that it's embedded in the curriculum of the law enforcement training?
Yes, absolutely. It's important because as the world moves into the digital age, as Africa moves into the digital age, we need to move along with it. We need to evolve with technology. So all the aspects of life need to evolve with technology. Unfortunately, there would be certain places, just speaking from around me, who do not have the access to the technology in the first place. So some of them might find some of the training a bit odd, but we are getting there. More people are getting access, more people are beginning to understand. So yeah, it definitely, I would say 100%, it needs to be added to the curriculum, that they're being taught and trained constantly.
Yes, I think when we speak on training, we should also here we were just mentioning the law enforcement agents. I think there is need to also target others, like the lawyers also need to be trained around this thing, and also the judiciary. And I also have a particular interest around parliamentarians, because they are the
Mm.
ones that are the lawmakers, and there is an opportunity as we engage in a constitutional reform or in legal reform to also incorporate issues on digital rights, and also include within that context women's rights. I just want
Mm.
to make an example of two countries, Botswana and South Africa. If you look at the cybercrime law in South Africa, it is a very important provision around non-consensual sharing of images that has been criminalized. And it's the same thing with Botswana as well. And I think these are the initiatives that need to be taken when, with in the drafting of the cybercrime laws, or what's called computer crimes laws in other countries. I think it will be best also to include these aspects of violence against women as well, especially the non-consensual sharing of images, and also when you're looking at children, the issues of violence against children online. But in order to effectively do that, I think we need to also speak to the issues of training. And I don't know if you're looking at our bodies within the African Union, the African Commission, the Pan-African Parliament, or the Children's Committee, what do you think they can do on issues of women's rights in the digital age?
So we're definitely talking about more policies in this regard. And then, of course, funding, because a lot of these things go back to funding. If digital security training, digital skills training, it all goes back to having more funding, having women to have,
funds.
sorry?
I'm saying yes, the funding
Oh, okay, sorry.
available for
I
that.
couldn't, yeah, sorry.
I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
Okay. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so
The
funding, a
funding
lot of
is
funding.
very important. Okay. So I think also, yes, there is need for funding, because to push certain projects, or to channel them towards the rightful people, you need certain resources, and that speaks to the issue of funding. And I think organizations also, in their projects, they can also target these bodies, these human rights bodies within the African human rights context. They can target, I just want to mention, the African Commission has a special rapporteur on the rights of women, on women's rights in Africa. So far, the special rapporteur has not done much has not had that focus on digital rights. And I think it's a very, it's an important aspect that can be, that organizations can begin to think about how they can engage the African Commission through the Special Rapporteur on Women's Rights, and address issues of women's rights in the digital age, in the positive aspects and also the negative aspects of violence. And then issues around litigation, again, issues around litigation on these things, there's an opportunity to engage the African Court on Human and People's Rights, and also the African Commission itself, because it also receives communications on behalf of victims of human rights violations.
Yes, that's
And
definitely something that skipped my mind, but you're right.
okay.
We have to, even when there aren't specific laws to disregard, at least to say technologically advanced violence, we need to engage with the law as it is, and even force the courts to interpret it as going to the extent of, women's rights online as well. So it's litigation is so important. We need to engage the courts and engage these laws as they are before they get adjusted into the way that we want them to be.
Yes, indeed. And also the role, I think we need to also mention the role of the African Parliament, which is the legislative body of the African Union as well. I think we need to also channel these efforts towards awareness to that, so that we know when we formulate laws in Africa on digital rights, they take into consideration the human rights element, which addresses children's rights, which also addresses women's rights. So all these bodies are really an opportunity for organizations such as ours, such as yours, to try and see how we can engage them, and for the advancement of women's rights in the digital age, which is really very important. I think other organizations that are doing it, but I think there could be more that can be done. So with these institutions that I'm just emphasizing on, there's a role that they play, because they provide guidance to states on human rights. The African Commission is there to oversee the implementation of the African Charter. The Children's Committee is there to oversee the implementation of the Children's Charter. And the Pan-African Parliament has a legislative role. So all these roles can be done within the context of digital rights. But in order for this to be effectively done, there is need for awareness, as we have already stated, there is need for adequate training. So I don't know, Khadija, we have had an interesting conversation. I don't know what you want to reiterate as we close.
It's really just that digital rights are human rights, as again, as we continue to move into a more digital era, would need to call on more traditional human rights organizations to begin to see digital rights as human rights. For instance, just last week, Twitter was banned in Nigeria. And, you know, before that, people did not take digital rights as seriously. But then having felt the impact of such a partial internet shutdown, people being denied all sorts of access, are now beginning to see digital rights as human rights. But we do not need to get to that point before we realize that our rights, our rights offline should apply online. Our rights do not suddenly disappear because we're using technology or we're using the internet, most especially to more disadvantaged groups like women.
Thank you, Khadija. I like the fact that you are saying digital rights are human rights. I think we can end on that very powerful note. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing with us your very rich insights around women's rights in the digital age. Thank you
I was about
for
to
this
say the same
time.
to you. Thank you for your fantastic insights. It was a fantastic conversation. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Have a lovely day.